Okay, hello. Yes, this is week number 2. Today is June 6th, Monday, and this is the video. Please read the announcements. There's some important information there. Um, now, right now, I want to discuss Descartes, the new reading. It's meditations, meditation 1 and 2. That's the assigned reading. We'll be doing that this week. It is philosophy. It's somewhat interesting. It's very clear. It's somewhat simple, but it deals with a very fundamental issue, right? And this we're going to talk about in terms of critical thinking foundations, the foundations of critical thinking. And here my example is COVID, the vaccines, the insecurity, the fact that we didn't know anything for so long, the anxiety that occurred, and the sort of mental breakdown, the psychological stress and anxiety that occurred to everybody, right? So this is, and what I'm saying is that psychological uncertainty and stress is really the lack of a foundation. We did not know what the basis of our beliefs were. Right? We couldn't know for sure, right? When you can't know for sure, you need to find a foundation. Right? So this is what I call critical thinking. This is how we're going to look at critical thinking. I think it's probably the best way. Is it difficult? Yes, it's difficult. It it's a practice. It's something that you do. Is it related to philosophy? Yes, it is. But we're going to look at it in terms of Descartes, a French philosopher. This text was written in 1641. It actually goes back to his period around 1618, 1620, when he was a young man in the 30 Years' War. Right? He was a mathematician. He was sort of a, you know, gifted student, and he was rich enough to sort of like buy his way out of the war eventually, even though at that point the war was, there were mercenaries. He started as a mercenary, and and this was the war of Protestants versus Catholics in all over Europe. Very destructive war, right? If you do a little research on the 30 Years' War, you'll see that something like 40 to 45% of the population of Central Europe around Germany, Austria, were killed. Right? They had mass hangings. It was Protestants versus Catholics. Right? And the end of the 30 Years' War is generally thought to be the beginning of the modern nation state in Europe. Right? So a very important period. You see, this is also the period of scientific revolution too. Right? So you have a lot of things coming together at the same time here. Right? And Descartes is a major figure in scientific revolution, modern mathematics, and philosophy. Right? And all of this he considers to be unified. Right? As what what are the foundations of thinking, of logic, of knowledge, of experience, of what we can know and not know. All right. So all that sounds really tough, but it's really not. So if you look at the text, right? Let me get my other computer here. All right. So if you look at the text here of Descartes, right? Um, it's very clear, very simple to read, right? But he's dealing with some difficult issues, right? Some years ago, I was struck by how many false things I had believed, and by how doubtful was the structure of beliefs that I had based on them. I realized that if I wanted to establish anything in the sciences that was stable and likely to last, I needed just once in my life to demolish everything completely and start again from the foundations. So he's saying that, right? He's struck by how many things that he believed were false, and how many things that were based on those false beliefs, right, turned out to be false, right? Because if something's based on a false belief and then you have another belief based on that belief, it's going to be false, right? So he says that he wants to get to the foundations. He wants to clear away everything, right? So this is called his method of doubt, right? So he's it's kind of grand, really, and exciting, and in some ways it's a little bit crazy. He does sort of compare it to being a madman, and so there's this element of what's called first philosophy, right? First philosophy is a term from Aristotle that he is using, and he calls his Meditations on First Philosophy, where he's trying to find the ultimate reality that he can depend on as secure, right? So again, if you go back to COVID, right, we did not know, is this serious, right? Is it a hoax? Is the virus real? Did it come from China, right? Is it safe to go on the subway? Is it safe to go to work? And, of course, we're always thinking, well, I don't really know. You never know what this person's telling me. Is it true or is it a lie, right? I'm looking out the window. Is it, is that a dream or not? And, for 5 or 10 minutes, that's fun, right? But we all know from COVID, after like a month or two of that, it starts to really affect you, right? So, imagine a religious war going on, right, for 30 years, right? Of course, you know, this was at the beginning, right? But he's thinking back, right? People dying, regime changes occurring, so there's chaos going on, right? So, and plus you have modern science beginning, right? Like, don't forget that this is the same time period where people used to believe, if you believe the church, and you were forced to believe this, that the the sun moved around the earth, because when you wake up, you look, the sun comes up in the east, it goes over your head, it goes into the west, so it looks like the sun is moving, right? But they'd already sort of discovered that that was not true, right? So what we see isn't necessarily true, right? You need to have logic, you need to have other experiments, you need to reinterpret the experiments, the facts, et cetera, right? So, but if you believe that the sun is moving around the earth and you base everything on that, you'll have a totally false picture of the universe, right? So this really did happen, right? Um, just like COVID really happened, right? And we had all that uncertainty, right? So the foundation, the search for a foundation is the attempt to come to a firm foundation, a ground, right? That's going to guarantee everything else is true, or at least some, right? Another way of looking at it is that if you don't have a ground or a foundation, you're constantly falling, right? So this was also this experience of COVID, right? Where the uncertainty created so much anxiety that people went crazy, right? I'm sure you know people who went crazy. Maybe you yourself, I think we all went a little bit crazy, right? Because you're just falling and falling and falling, and you never hit a firm ground, right? So it's just confusing, right? Uncertain, right? Anxiety, right? Anger, resentment, you know. Plus, Trump was the president back then, right? He was making it worse with all of his disinformation, saying one thing and saying the other, and then, right? So the idea of just making it up, right? Is a real sort of like experience that we have, and it does cause anxiety when you don't know what to believe, right? The idea of gaslighting, right? That you don't know what to believe, right? So in a way, what I want to try to look at here with Descartes is his attempt to resolve this issue, right? That there is a foundation, right? Okay, so he goes on in his text, right? I can do this without showing that all my beliefs are false, which is probably more than I can ever manage. My reason tells me that as well as withholding assent from propositions that are obviously false, I should also withhold it from ones that are not completely certain and indubitable, right? So what he's saying there is that what he wants to do is he wants to doubt all the beliefs that he's not 100% sure of, right? Because the foundation must be 100% sure, all right? So that's the idea of a foundation, so that you can guarantee everything else. Also, another word for foundation is ground, right? So this is this idea of critical thinking, that you need a ground, a reason, right? So we're going to see how difficult this is, but he does have a solution, right? It's not 100% like perfect, but it does sort of work really to some extent, and it's quite important in modern science, modern mathematics, and philosophy, right? This idea of subjectivity of consciousness, right? Ultimately, he goes to what's his answer, right? For him, the answer is, I think, therefore I am. That's what he's famous for, right? In philosophy, right? Now, what does this mean? This means that, well, it's possible that what I'm experiencing right now, I'm looking at my hands, I'm touching my glasses, I'm putting my glasses on, right? I'm looking out the window. It's possible that I could be in a dream right now, right? And so, and so it's possible. And how would I know,
right? Well, I'm probably not, right? I can touch myself, feel myself, right? I'm usually awake. This is probably real, but, right? Can I guarantee that this is not a dream? His answer is no, you cannot guarantee it 100%, right? Now he compares that to just using your eyes or your ears at any given point, right? For instance, if I'm looking out the window and I look down 2 blocks and I see somebody coming and it looks like my brother, but I'm not sure, and I say, oh, I'm going to call him, and it's not my brother, right? But I thought it was, right? So we're constantly being proven that what we see and hear and touch is not real, right? And then we have to adjust, and and then we correct ourselves, right? But at any given moment, you don't know for sure. You can't consider that to be 100% foundation, right? You know, that's the problem that Descartes has. So what is the 100% foundation? Well, eventually he comes to, well, even if I'm dreaming, even if I'm hallucinating, right? That my consciousness at this present moment exists, even if it's hallucinating, right? So his foundation is the existence of the I think, of consciousness in the present moment, a unique present moment, right? So we'll get to that later, right? So this is the foundation that Descartes he sort of discovers this in the early 1620 period, right? That the existence of the I think, of the cogito, this is the word, cogito means I think, or I have a thought, right? I'm thinking something, I'm turning something over in my mind, right? Right. It's not seeing, right? It's not pure sensation, right? It's mental consciousness. That's what we call it, really, at this point, right? And it turns into what we call modern subjective consciousness, right? Um, as the origin of psychology, or the foundation of psychology. For instance, for instance, there's a great example I used in my class last time, right? And so that is like, right, the cogito is what you pay attention to, right? Like right now, you might be listening to this video, but there's nothing stopping you from picking up your phone and scrolling through your Instagram, right? And in a way, that's the cogito, right? Your freedom. The cogito also has freedom, right? The cogito is the I think, my consciousness. You have the freedom to look and to focus your consciousness on whatever you choose to look at, right? Nobody really controls that except for you, right? Now, it doesn't mean that what you look at is true or what you look at is real, but the looking, right, or the thinking, the awareness, the consciousness now, that is the foundation, right? So that is a new thought that Descartes has, right? Okay, let's go to the problem of God, and then we'll stop, okay? Um, Another way of looking at the whole problem of Descartes is in this question of foundations, right? Prior to Descartes, or the conventional thinking Descartes, or the police thinking, right? The ideology, the religion, is that God created the world, right? And that God is the cause. God is the foundation for all other beliefs, all other awareness, all other consciousness. That my consciousness is actually founded or based on being created by God, right? Now you notice that the first thing, and Descartes got into trouble for this, his book was banned by the church. And this was the time when Protestantism was still sort of like a rogue religion, really. So this was subject to a lot of theological debates, you know. And anyways, so the problem of God, right? Does God exist, right? Here, right? It's not really the question of does God exist, but is God the foundation for all knowledge, experience, beliefs, and creation, right? Even if he says, even if God created me, right? How do I know that he didn't create me such that I would look outside and think that it was raining outside, but it was really not raining, right? You know, how, just like when I look far away and I think it's my brother, but it's not my brother, right? And and he also brings up the issue of, is it possible that God is an evil deceiver, and he's created me such that not only can I not trust what I see and touch and hear, right, but even the truths of mathematics, right? 2 plus 2 is 4. Triangle has 3 angles adding up to 180 degrees. The shortest line, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Is it possible that God made me think that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line? Is it possible that God created me such that that was, it seems 100% true, right? Therefore, it could be a foundation, but it's actually false, right? Is it possible that God is an evil deceiver, right? So you notice that, right? What he's doing here with this first philosophy, attempting to find the foundation and to establish a foundation based on my own existence as a consciousness, right? Or as consciousness in the unique present, right? Doesn't matter whether it's true or false, but that this consciousness exists, right? Um, that does not need God, right? So it's a kind of a simple, but it's 100% true that in a way the 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 establishment of the foundation of consciousness as the foundation for all experience, knowledge, and truth and belief replaces God as the external foundation, right? So that whether God exists or not, right, is subject to my consciousness, right? That my consciousness precedes, right, is the foundation for the existence of God. Why is that true? Well, think about it, right? If I believe that God exists, right, that requires me to think about that and to believe it, right? So in a way, right, my belief, my thinking, my consciousness is greater than the existence of God, right? It comes first, right? Because if my existence didn't, if I didn't exist, if I didn't have a consciousness, right? If I didn't have the belief that God existed, right? What would it matter if God existed, right? So look, you could look at that either way. You could say, well, maybe you don't matter. Okay, right? But you notice that what is going on in Descartes is saying that, well, in fact, right, what is more fundamental is my own thinking and consciousness, right? That is more fundamental than the existence of God, right? In fact, the existence of God is really just something that I can think about, right? So you can see then from a theological point of view that he's sort of like turning this around, right? So look, I realize that this is sort of difficult. The reading is quite simple, right? So if you read meditation 1, you'll see many of these issues here, right? And I will make another video probably tomorrow to follow up on this. Okay, so please read Descartes Meditation 1. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to know all the details, but if you could just get this idea of, well, in order to have critical thinking, really in order to do critical thinking, or really to put it this way, right? And to do critical thinking is to find the foundations, right? On what you can guarantee what you think is true or false, right? Okay, so and we will eventually do a discussion board on this, and this will be available for this will be one of your research sources, Descartes Meditations 1 and 2. All right. Okay, so I think I've gone on long enough, and check out Blackboard. There's some other material on there that supports Descartes that you should take a look at too. All right, thank you very much. Very good. Stopping the recording.